Welcome back to episode 3 of the Peacemakers podcast. I'm Lindsay Hager, your host, and today we have a very special interview with a new friend of mine, Rachel Pritz. Rachel is a certified life coach and also a certified Enneagram coach. Prior to coaching, Rachel spent 17 years in healthcare as a bedside nurse, leader, and executive. She now owns her own coaching and consulting practice, and she has a passion for helping people grow and develop into their full potential. She is an Enneagram 9 and loves sharing her Enneagram journey and how she continues to use it to improve herself and to empower her clients. In this interview, Rachel and I get into how we can use the Enneagram as a tool for self-awareness and growth. Rachel also has a free resource for you that you'll learn about towards the end of the interview. I'm really excited to share this with you, so here we go. Thank you so much, Rachel, for coming on today. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm here with Rachel Pritz, and Rachel is a life coach, and she specializes in the Enneagram. And I'd like you to just tell us a little bit more about your experience with life coaching and the Enneagram. Here at the beginning of my podcast, I want to provide my listeners with coaches and resources and counselors that specifically can speak to the Enneagram. And so I'm just excited to have you here and want to just gain some of your expertise, I guess, in life coaching and specifically for our Enneagram 9 friends.
So when I decided to become a life coach, I'm a nurse by background. That was not what I expected, but couldn't stop the nudge to kind of go towards that direction. So when I decided to become a life coach, the Enneagram had nothing to do with coach training. I was exposed to that through a different channel. And so as I was learning to be a coach and was in coach training for a year, I got exposed to the Enneagram. So it was interesting because I'd done so many personality tests in my corporate jobs that I was a bit of a skeptic, honestly. So when I first got exposed to it was about 4 years ago, somebody said, "Hey, I have this personality assessment. I think you would really like it. You love, personal development." And I said, okay. So I, took the test and it came back that I was a 3, which was somewhat not surprising at the time because I was in a big period of growth. But I read it and thought, no, like this admiration thing and wanting to be kind of the center of attention. I'm like, oh no, like that's the opposite of me. So it didn't resonate with me. And some of the other personality assessments, didn't always resonate with me either. So I kind of put it on the, in the drawer and kind of said, okay, yeah, this is not going to be my thing. And while I was, going through coach training and just kind of continuously listening to podcasts, trying to grow and develop myself to the best version of myself so I could give it to my clients, I just kept getting nudged. I mean, like every podcast I listened to was like, "Hey, have you heard of the Enneagram?" And it's like, okay. I mean, I was in a line at Starbucks and somebody turned around and asked me if I'd heard of the Enneagram. And I'm like, all right, I guess I need to circle back. I feel like I'm really being nudged to circle back on this thing. I decided I was going to jump in with both feet, independent from my coaching. So I just jumped in with both feet. And this is all about my own self-discovery and self-awareness. And so I read quite a few books. I should probably count them up at some point, but it was a lot. So read all sorts of different authors and different thinking around the Enneagram because there's a lot of different, stances out there, no pun intended. So I like to expose myself to lots of different leaders and how they're using it. And so read a lot, did tons of podcasts and discovered that I was a 9. And so it was an aha moment. I mean, it was really, I had to pull my car off the side of the road listening to the podcast because a woman was describing my life and it was a lot of things that I was just asleep to. So I literally had to pull the car off the side of the road. So for a while, I was still doing my own self-discovery. So, over the next, year or so, I was just constantly piecing together, oh my gosh, oh, that makes so much sense. This from my childhood makes so much sense. This, my marriage makes so much sense. And so I was really just piecing it together for myself. And then with that knowledge, I started just casually, bringing it up to clients and they seemed really interested. So I was kind of having those two things go in two separate directions or at least running parallel to each other. And it got to a point that it didn't make sense for those not to intersect. So I use the Enneagram with my clients as a starting point for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
It starts them on that self-awareness journey, and it also helps me learn how to coach them. I work with lots of high achievers, so I happen to get a lot of Enneagram 3s, and I don't need to give them more goals. There's some people that I do need to say, okay, what's good? What's going to be your goal for next week? And I'll make sure that I hold you accountable for that. That's not what I need to do for 3. So those two worlds started intersecting, and then it just became sort of the backbone of my coaching. So I start people with that. We get into all sorts of wonderful conversations through learning their type and understanding how they can grow through their type. That's a huge piece to what I do and what I'm doing as a life coach as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think I hear myself in your story, obviously, because I'm an Enneagram 9 also. I think for me, the Enneagram has been like, I didn't pull the car over and stop, but it was like that internal, like somebody is speaking directly to my experience. And I've lived so much in my head, like my whole life, sat in the background, observed, kind of have all these thoughts, have all these opinions, and also just trying to figure out how to show up in the world, how to bring that person to the world has been a huge internal struggle for me. So I feel the same way, like hearing how the Enneagram speaks to our motivations. And when I'm reading these books and studying, I'm like, how did we not know about this all this time? I mean, it's been around forever, but I feel almost like a loss that I haven't known about it for my whole life. I know that you and I come from the same philosophy on personal development and self-awareness. It seems like we kind of are on the same page. Learning about ourselves and becoming aware of how we interact in the world and how we show up. I mean, that's kind of the starting point for growth. That's the starting point for, improving our lives. It sounds like you're saying the same thing with your clients. You're helping them like go inward to find out who they are. And then that's a starting point for that growth moving forward. Tell me more about that growth, because I know that that's a focus of yours and how you would help somebody grow using the Enneagram.
Yeah, so I actually have a personal mission statement, and it's to grow and develop people into their full potential. So truly, my core is wanting people to get unstuck and to reach their full potential. So one of the parts of the Enneagram that I love is the levels of development. So that is a big part of what we talk through. And they do a lot of, just self-rating through the levels of development, which I think is really helpful to have them see where they are and then to see where they can get. I think that's the key part. So like I always call that the healthy section, #goals, right? This is where we all want to live. Most of my clients in the corporate space live in the average space. So, most of us are kind of just going through the motion. Yeah. So I think, outside of just telling people, hey, I want you to be the best version of yourself, that feels pretty daunting and broad. And for most of us, we need it to be articulated in a specific way for us to really see that that's possible. So the levels of development are big. That's something I use in my own personal life, is just checking in. On most days, I check in on the levels of development and say, where did I land yesterday? And, how did I wake up? How did I go to sleep? And how can I get back up into that healthy level if I wasn't already there? So I think that's a big piece with growth. And then also just, some of the discovery of the arrows and where you go in stress. I think that's huge. In our culture in America, I think we've normalized stress, and many of us are just living in stress. I coach, like I said, a lot of high achievers, and they'll be confused about their type at times because they're describing who they are on a regular basis, but that's them living in stress. So I think that's huge to recognize when and how you show up in stress, so you can call a timeout and say, what's happening in my life and how can I put some things into place, maybe set some new healthy boundaries or whatever that would look like for that particular client to get out of that stressful situation. And then I think just having them go back throughout their life and once I knew the Enneagram and understood all of it, and I could go back throughout my life and say, oh my gosh, I did that. And that was a period of growth. And yes, I looked like a 3. I mean, I just think there's so many advantages to going back throughout your life and to pointing out how far you've come, from where you were when you were 20 years old or whatever age, you go back to. So I think those are the biggest things that I use for clients and the things that they find a lot of value in.
Now, for Enneagram 9s, and for my listeners, when I'm speaking about Enneagram 9s, I'm always going to be speaking kind of through my own lens. but bringing in the knowledge that we're getting from our coaches and from Enneagram coaches and from life coaches and just from the work that we're doing together as we take this journey together as Enneagram 9's growing. So I guess I want to say to my listeners that when I'm showing up and sharing my own experience, it may not exactly pertain to you. So my experience, like I'm starting a podcast, you may be out there and be like, oh, that doesn't sound like growing at all to me. That sounds like horrible. But for me, that's like a huge step for me. And that's taking a step forward and putting myself out there in a way that I never thought that I could. So I want you to be thinking as you're growing and as you're looking ahead, like what is just that one step forward I can take? So Rachel, coming back to you, like, because I'm looking at some of your videos, you do this Monday morning, like, what's your Monday morning? Yeah, your pep talk. Like you get on Instagram and you're like, hey, this is Rachel and here's my pep talk. Like I love stuff like that. And I'm a 9 with a 1 wing. So I love like that structure of here's your quick nuggets of truth and here's kind of some action steps. How do you use that type of approach with your clients?
Yeah, so I actually call them turtle steps. So a lot of, especially 9s, I think struggle with this, but a lot of people struggle with feeling stuck. So when they're feeling overwhelmed, it really doesn't matter what your Enneagram type is. They don't know what to do next. And we often think we have to do something really big to change our lives drastically. And what we really need is just to take a small turtle step and then take another small turtle step, right? And so I really focus in on that, especially when they're in that part of the change cycle where they're really feeling like they don't know which end is up. It's not time to quit your job, leave your spouse, all these things that kind of run through our minds because we're so uncomfortable that we just want to do anything to get out of where we're at. I think that's a big piece to it, is just taking, the next right step. May not even be the right step, but the next step that you think is right at that time.
Exactly. Giving ourselves like a lot of grace. I can get stuck in my head very quickly. I have a recorder in my head of these thoughts that I've thought for years and years and years. So as a peacemaker, I've thought, I need to show up in this relationship in this way because that's how I'm going to keep the peace with this person. I think that's what I want my listeners to understand, is that we can change our brain and these messages that we have developed over time. And a lot of it's from our childhood. A lot of it's from just, messages we picked up. But as an Enneagram 9, there's some pretty like unifying beliefs that we have. If we look into the Enneagram and see like those
core fears and core desires.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're living through that lens of core fear that we might have, or that desire for connection. So I want my listeners to know more about that, how to take a new belief and fit it with their Enneagram type. So as a 9, my desire is for connection, or my fear is to be separated or, lose that connection. Like what would be an example you could give us of maybe how to change our mindset, or how to just move in that new direction of a new mindset? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So this is where the life coach training and certification intersects so nicely with the Enneagram, which is what I love, because the Enneagram seems to be interwoven in a lot of different things. Growth mindset is one of those, but something that we do in life coach training and what I do in my practice is thought inquiry. So when people have a thought, we really narrow down into what the true limiting belief is, or the most painful thought is, and then we question it. Our brains are capable of lying to us. Our bodies are not. And if we're healthy and not disassociated with our bodies as 9s, we know what our bodies are telling us. So that was a huge win for my own journey, is to listening to my body versus my brain, and then just question my thinking. Is it true? I think that's a really powerful question. Is that true? Can you absolutely know that that is true? And sort of changing those neural pathways in that way. I also think when you look at the Enneagram, because it does give us a clear growth path, especially with, 9s and arrows with those wings. I'm a 9 with a 8 wing. And so we're like a unicorn, right? We're not assertive, we are assertive. And so I just have learned to flip that switch on and off, because I've learned when it serves me. So I think of us being Enneagram 9s as that's our personality, but I also think it's our life strategy. And when our life strategy isn't working anymore for us, then we change it. And so me being in leadership and leading large teams in an organization, avoiding conflict or things that were uncomfortable just wasn't going to be possible in order for me to be successful. So I trained my brain to tap into that 8 wing and turn it on when I needed to, but then be able to turn it off as well. And that's been a journey because you can turn it on in its unhealthy aspects. So I think I had to really be careful with that. And there were times that I did that. And so that's something that I work a lot with clients with too. Okay, let's try this on. Turn this part of your potential personality on. See what happens. Maybe it's not going to work, but let's see what happens, because right now what you're doing is not working for you. So when it no longer serves us, we need to find a different way.
So this Enneagram is like spreading across the country. It's been around forever. I'm meeting some people that, live in the United Kingdom or live in different states, and it's spreading, becoming very popular. It's becoming also popular kind of like in a Instagram meme kind of way. We're finding connection through a funny meme or a joke or, this and that. But what I want is for us to start using that as like, okay, that's a starting point. That's good. But let's go to the next step. So if someone was out there and maybe they've just discovered that they're a peacemaker, maybe they're like, oh gosh, they're like you, like, oh gosh, I am a 9. And yes, this is how I show up in the world. And it kind of feels yucky. What's their next step? Should they reach out to a coach? What do they do next?
Being a coach, I think coaches can expedite that work. A trained coach that's really been trained in the Enneagram, I think that they can help you along in that journey. But I also think there's so much self-reflection that's needed, and there's a lot that you can do on your own. So I would say look at some reputable resources and start doing some work. I mean, some of the more mainstream books like Road Back to You is a great starting point. And, I tell people while they're discovering themselves, there's a lot of mistyping that goes on too. So read about all the types. That was the beauty of my journey, is that I didn't know what my type was. And so I had to read and discover about all the types. And there's so much grace that comes with that for people. That completely changed my life and how I view other people, and how I also depersonalize their behavior. So yeah, if somebody's acting in a certain way, I'm like, oh gosh, they're probably just an Enneagram 8. And I can have great, before it's like, what a jerk, I'm going to withdraw and go sit in the corner. So I think there's so much value there. But yeah, like I said, I do think that getting some factual information from somebody that is trained is really helpful. I do see some people that have been exposed to the Enneagram for a while over-identifying with their number. So it's like, I'm a 9, I'm a 9. That's all they can see. And there's so much more to it than just the number that you have, been tagged with. And I also really, think that's what differentiates the Enneagram, is that it's not putting you in a box. It's just saying, hey, here's the box over here. We've taken the lid off and we've cut off the sides. We want you to get out. It's just a critical piece to it that is being missed on Instagram. Don't get me wrong. Some of these memes and some of the stuff is hilarious. It's a ton of fun. But as it kind of, like you said, kind of infiltrates all these different areas across our country and in other countries, I think that there's going to be even more need for people that are truly trained in it and can unleash the full power of it and not have it be a limiting factor for us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want my listeners to know where they can find you. And on Instagram, your Enneagram, Indy, INDY.
Yep. So
And so we're going to put that in the show notes, but your website is rachelpritz.com. Tell us more, like if someone wanted to reach out to you for a coaching session or anything else regarding how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. So on Instagram, if you're on Instagram, there is a link in my bio that you can set up a 20-minute discovery call. That's just an opportunity for us to talk about what you are looking for as a client, and then to also make sure that we would both be a good fit, and then to talk through some of those logistics things and what that could look like moving forward. You can also do that on my website. So pretty quickly when you log in, you can see an opportunity for a free clarity call. I'm not a sleazy salesperson. I don't think too many Enneagram 9s probably are. So I'm like, it's really just a genuine conversation. And if it doesn't work out, no worries. So, no problem. And just, it's an opportunity to kind of help us make sure that it's a good fit, because I always tell people that too. I'm not going to be a fit for every single person out there. So make sure you search and find a good fit.
That's good. Is there anything else you'd like to share with my audience before we leave, or a resource or anything that they can have that could help them on their journeys?
Yeah, so I sent you a priorities worksheet that I do with clients, not just with Enneagram 9s, but I think it's really helpful for 9s. It was helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just identifying what your priorities are. And so then you can commit your time to those priorities instead of procrastinating and doing stuff that isn't valuable or isn't needed because we like to do that. And so I think that's a helpful worksheet for people just to walk through on their own, just to say, here's where I am today. Here's where I want to be. How am I going to get there? And how can I schedule time around 5 or 6 priorities and make sure, I'm energized around those.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much for talking with me today and all the resources and information you've offered to our audience. I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes. And also, if our listeners would like to check out your resource or your website, all of that's going to be listed for everyone in the show notes. Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Sounds good. I always love talking about Enneagram 9, so this is fun.
Thank you. If you aren't already a part of our Facebook community, it's called Enneagram 9 Stories, and this is an exclusive community just for Type 9. So over there, we're supporting each other as 9s, we ask questions, we're gaining more insights into ourselves as Type 9s, and also we're discussing further the topics that we talk about here on the podcast. So if I don't see you there, I'll chat with you more in the next episode. Thanks.